Chapter 1. Evelyn woke to the smell of coffee. Not the faint apartment building hallway coffee that sometimes drifted under her door, but rich, dark, expensive coffee, the kind that spoke of careful grinding and precise brewing. She blinked against the morning light filtering through unfamiliar curtains, her body heavy with deep, unexpected sleep. For a moment she was disoriented. The bed was too large, the sheets too crisp, the ceiling too high. Then memory crashed over her. Washington. The presentation. The hotel. The confession. Dominic. Her hand slid to her stomach, still flat beneath the soft cotton of the borrowed t-shirt. 2 months. She was 2 months pregnant. And the man who had listened to that revelation with stunned joy instead of cold fury was currently, judging by the sounds, moving around in the kitchenette of this lavish hotel suite. She sat up slowly, her head swimming. Morning sickness hadn't arrived yet today, but it lurked like a threat in the background of her consciousness. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, her bare feet sinking into plush carpet. The t-shirt, his t-shirt, fell to mid-thigh. It smelled like him, clean linen and something faintly cedar, a scent that now felt imprinted on her memory. When she padded into the main living area, he was standing at the small counter, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. He'd changed into dark jeans and a simple gray Henley, the sleeves pushed up to his elbows. He looked domestic, approachable. It was a startling contrast to the imposing, sharply suited figure who had sat across from her in the SUV yesterday. He turned, sensing her presence. His gaze swept over her, from her tousled hair to her bare legs, and for a heartbeat, something hot and unguarded flashed in his eyes. It was gone almost instantly, replaced by a careful neutrality. "You're awake." His voice was a low rumble. "I wasn't sure if you'd want coffee. I have decaf. Or tea. Or there's juice." He gestured to a small array of containers on the counter. Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself. "Decaf is fine. Thank you." He nodded, finishing the pour and handing her a mug. Their fingers brushed. A tiny electric spark jumped between them. She saw him feel it too, a slight tightening of his jaw, a quick drop of his gaze. "How are you feeling?" he asked, turning back to the counter to fiddle with a paper bag. "Okay." She took a cautious sip. It was perfect, just the right amount of cream, no sugar. She hadn't told him how she took it. A little surreal. A small wry smile touched his lips. "That makes 2 of us." Silence settled between them, thick and loaded. It wasn't hostile, but it was filled with the enormity of what they now shared. A life. A future irrevocably intertwined. Evelyn cleared her throat. "About arrangements," she began, the word feeling clinical and wrong. "I've been thinking. Once the baby is born, we can set up a visitation schedule. Something consistent. And of course, we'll work out child support through the proper channels. I don't want anything complicated." Dominic had been pulling a croissant from the bag. He went very still. Slowly, he set it down on a plate and turned to face her fully, leaning back against the counter. His expression was unreadable. "A visitation schedule," he repeated, his tone flat. "Yes. I think consistency is important for children. Maybe every other weekend to start, and we can adjust as." "No," the single word cut through her planning. It wasn't loud, but it was absolute, like a door slamming shut. Evelyn blinked. "No. No," he pushed off the counter and took a step toward her. He didn't crowd her, but his presence seemed to fill the room. "I am not a weekend father, Evelyn. I am not a check in the mail. I am not an arrangement." Her spine straightened. "I didn't say you were. I'm trying to be practical. We're not together. We live separate lives. This is how co-parenting works." "Is it?" He raised a brow. "You've done this before?" "You know I haven't." "Then don't tell me how it works." He took the mug from her unresisting hand and set it aside, his movements deliberate. He then placed his hands on her shoulders. They were warm, heavy, grounding. "Look at me." She lifted her chin, meeting his eyes. They were the color of a stormy sea, intense and focused entirely on her. "I am going to be there for every single part of this," he said, each word measured and clear. "Every doctor's appointment. Every ultrasound where we get to hear that heartbeat. Every time you're up at 3 a.m. because you can't get comfortable or because you're craving something absurd. The first kick. The swollen feet. The ridiculous arguments over names. The panic when we don't know what a cry means. All of it. That is my child too, Evelyn. And you are the mother of my child. You don't get to relegate me to the sidelines of either of your lives. Her throat tightened. His words were a vow, not a suggestion. They sparked a treacherous, forbidden warmth in her chest. A yearning for exactly that kind of unwavering partnership. But fear was a cold counterweight. Dominic, you can't just insert yourself. We barely know each other. You're my boss. You're Nathaniel's uncle. Your family despised me. A shadow crossed his face at Nathaniel's name. I am not my nephew. And my family's opinion ceased to matter to me a long time ago. As for barely knowing you. His thumb stroked a slow, soothing path along her collarbone. I know you're brilliant. Fierce. Resilient. You have a quiet strength that humbles me. I know you love dark chocolate but pretend you don't. I know you get a tiny furrow between your brows when you're concentrating on code. I know the sound of your laugh, and I've spent years wishing I heard it more. He paused, his gaze searching hers. I want to know the rest. Let me in. Let me be part of this with you. The raw honesty in his voice undid her. It was too much, too soon. A tidal wave against her carefully rebuilt walls. She took a step back, breaking the contact. It's not that simple, she whispered, turning toward the window. The city sprawled below them, anonymous and vast. Trust isn't a switch I can flip. I just got free, Dominic. I finally pried myself out of a cage where I was constantly belittled, betrayed, and made to feel inadequate. The idea of tying myself to another man, especially one from that same family, it terrifies me. She expected argument, impatience. Instead, she heard him move closer, stopping just behind her. His warmth radiated against her back. I know, he said, his voice gentler now. And I would never ask you to flip a switch. All I'm asking is that you don't lock the door. Let me prove I'm not like him. Let me show you what it means to be respected, cherished, protected, not as a transaction but as a right. Evelyn closed her eyes, a single tear escaping to trace a path down her cheek. He didn't try to wipe it away. He just stood there, a solid, patient presence at her back. What does that look like? She asked, her voice thick. For now. He sighed, a soft exhale. For now, it looks like us flying home today. It looks like you letting me take you to your first prenatal appointment next week. It looks like us figuring out what you need to be comfortable and healthy. One day at a time, Evelyn. That's all I'm asking for. One day at a time. She turned then, looking up at him. The morning light caught the flecks of gold in his gray eyes. There was no manipulation there, no hidden agenda. Just a stark, daunting sincerity. He was offering her a partnership. A real one. And the most frightening part was how badly a wounded piece of her soul wanted to say yes. One day at a time, she repeated, testing the words. A slow, genuine smile softened the stern lines of his face. It transformed him, making him look younger, almost boyish in his relief. Okay. But Dominic, she added, holding up a finger. A flicker of her old spirit sparked. No hovering. No smothering. I am perfectly capable of managing my own pregnancy and my career. The smile turned into a full grin, one that made her stomach do a foolish little flip that had nothing to do with nausea. Duly noted. Now, he said, gesturing to the counter. I have a very plain bagel and some ginger tea for you. The internet says it might help. He'd been researching. Of course he had. Evelyn allowed herself a small, tentative smile in return. The internet is occasionally correct. As she sat at the small table and took the plate he offered, she felt the first fragile thread of a new understanding weave between them. It was thin, easily broken. But it was there. One day at a time. It was a start. Chapter 2. The flight back was different. Silence still stretched between them, but it wasn't the strained, icy quiet of the trip to Washington. This was a quieter, more contemplative hum. Evelyn spent most of it looking out the window at the quilt of clouds, one hand resting lightly on her abdomen. Dominic worked on his tablet, but his attention seemed divided, his gaze drifting to her profile every few minutes. When the plane touched down, a new layer of reality settled over her. They were home. Back to their separate apartments in the same building. Back to their professional roles, boss and brilliant systems engineer. Back to a life that now had a secret growing center. Dominic's driver was waiting. As they slid into the back of the car, Evelyn braced herself for the awkwardness of their building's lobby, the elevator ride. But he surprised her. "We'll use the private garage entrance," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "My penthouse has a dedicated elevator. You can take it to your floor. No one needs to see us together until you're ready." The consideration was so simple, yet so profound. It wasn't about hiding, she realized. It was about giving her control over the narrative, over her own privacy. After years of having her life dissected and discussed by the Harrington family, it felt like a gift. "Thank you," she said quietly. He simply nodded. The private elevator was sleek and silent. When it stopped on the 5th floor, the doors whispered open to her familiar hallway. The normality of it, the slightly faded carpet, the faint smell of someone's dinner cooking, was jarring. "Evelyn." Dominic's voice stopped her as she stepped out. She turned. He stood holding the elevator door open, his expression serious. "Your first appointment. Next Thursday at 10. I cleared my schedule. I'll pick you up at 9:30. It wasn't a question. But it also wasn't a demand. It was a statement of intent, firm yet leaving her an opening to refuse. She should refuse. She should assert her independence, tell him she would go alone and send him the notes. The old Evelyn, the one trained by Nathaniel's neglect, would have done exactly that, building a wall of self-sufficiency to hide the hurt. But the new Evelyn, the one who was tired of fighting every battle alone, hesitated. She remembered the look of pure, unadulterated joy on his face when she told him, "I'm going to be a father." This mattered to him. Deeply. "Okay," she heard herself say. 9:30. His shoulders relaxed a fraction. "Okay. Get some rest." The doors closed, leaving her alone in the hall. She let herself into her studio apartment, the space suddenly feeling both too small and too empty. She dropped her bag and leaned back against the door. One day at a time. The next week passed in a strange liminal space. Work was a blessing. A complex, absorbing problem with her prototype's integration kept her mind fiercely occupied for 8 hours a day. Dominic was in the office, but he was distant, professional. He didn't seek her out. He didn't send overly personal emails. He was, as promised, not hovering. Yet his presence was a constant, subtle hum in the background. One afternoon, a delivery arrived at her desk. A small, elegant cooler bag. Inside were several containers of freshly cut fruit, plain crackers, a smoothie from the expensive juicery 3 blocks away, and a note in his bold, slashing handwriting. "The internet also says small, frequent meals can help." Eva, her desk neighbor, peered over. "Ooh, fancy. Secret admirer." Evelyn's cheeks warmed. Just a concerned party. She ate the fruit. It helped. Another day, she came back from a meeting to find a ridiculously luxurious memory foam footrest under her desk. No note that time. She started using it immediately. Her lower back, already protesting the hormonal changes, sighed in relief. He was anticipating needs she hadn't even voiced. It was unnerving. It was incredibly thoughtful. She found herself watching him in turn. In meetings, he was a force of nature. Decisive, commanding respect with a quiet authority that never tipped into bullying. He listened, truly listened, to his team's ideas. And when she spoke about her project, his attention was absolute. He didn't just hear her, he saw her. He saw the intelligence, the passion, the competence. He empowered it. It was a stark, dizzying contrast to Nathaniel, who had always subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, undermined her work, calling it a cute hobby compared to the real business of the family empire. By Wednesday evening, the initial terror had receded, replaced by a low-grade anxiety about the appointment itself, making a life real. She was standing in her tiny kitchen, staring blankly into her nearly empty fridge, when her intercom buzzed. She jumped. No one ever used it except delivery people. "Yes. It's Dominic." His voice was slightly distorted by the cheap speaker. Her heart did an annoying little stutter. She pressed the button to unlock the building's main door. A minute later, a firm knock sounded. He stood in her hallway, looking out of place in his impeccably tailored coat. He held a large, lidded paper bag. I was passing by, he said, which was a transparent lie. His penthouse was above her, not on the way to anywhere. I thought you might not feel like cooking. He stepped inside, his gaze taking in her small space with a quick analytical sweep, not judging, just assessing. It was clean, minimalist, with books stacked on the floor and a single thriving orchid on the windowsill. A sanctuary. You didn't have to do that, she said, though her traitorous stomach growled at the delicious aroma wafting from the bag. I know. He set the bag on her counter and started unpacking. Containers of clear broth, plain rice, steamed chicken, roasted carrots. Bland, gentle food. How have you been feeling? Better, actually. The nausea is mostly in the mornings now. She hovered, feeling awkward. Can I get you some water? I'm fine. He finished unpacking and turned, leaning against the counter. Nervous about tomorrow? She hugged herself. A little. It makes it all official. It is official. He said it softly. But it's also wonderful. We get to hear our baby's heart for the first time. Our baby. The word sent a shiver through her. She looked at him, really looked. He seemed entirely focused on her. His usual formidable intensity softened into something like concern. No, more than concern. Care. Why are you being so nice to me? The question slipped out, raw and unvarnished. He blinked, taken aback. Why wouldn't I be? Because. She threw her hands up. This is a massively complicated situation I dropped on you. Because we had one night. Because I've been avoiding you for 2 months. Because I'm your employee. Take your pick. A muscle ticked in his jaw. He pushed off the counter and took a single step toward her, closing the distance just enough to be felt. Listen to me, Evelyn. That night wasn't just a night for me. And this baby isn't a complication. It's a gift. A terrifying, miraculous gift that I never thought I'd have. He raked a hand through his hair, a rare sign of agitation. As for you being my employee, your talent is why I hired you. What's happening between us personally is separate. It will remain separate at work. You have my word. And what is happening between us personally, Dominic? She challenged, her voice trembling. What is this? Paternal obligation? Guilt? Some sort of misplaced white knight complex? For a long moment, he just looked at her, his stormy eyes searching her face. The air crackled between them, thick with all the things unsaid. She saw the answer in his gaze. It was vast, complex, and terrifying in its intensity. It was more than obligation. But he didn't voice it. He reined it in, giving her space. What's happening? He said finally, his voice low and rough. Is that I care about you. And I care about our child. And I am going to be there for both of you in whatever way you'll let me. That's it. That's the only agenda. Evelyn's breath hitched. The sincerity was a physical force. It disarmed her completely. Okay, she whispered, the fight draining out of her. He nodded, the tension easing from his shoulders. Okay, eat something. Try to rest. I'll be here at 9:30. He left as quietly as he came, leaving the smell of good food and his unsettling presence behind. Evelyn sank onto her stool, staring at the containers. He cared about her. Not just the mother of his child. Her. The knowledge was a warm, fragile flame in the cold hollow of her chest where trust used to live. It was the most dangerous thing he could have given her. Because she was starting to care about him too. Chapter 3. The medical center was all soft lighting, calming blues, and the faint sterile scent of antiseptic. Evelyn sat in the exam room. The crinkly paper of the examination table loud beneath her clenched hands. She changed into a hospital gown, feeling vulnerable and exposed. Dominic stood by the window, his posture rigid, staring out at the parking lot. He'd been silent for the last 10 minutes, a contained energy radiating from him. You can sit, you know, she said, her voice sounding small. He turned. I'm fine. You're looming. It's making me more nervous. A flicker of something like chagrin crossed his face. He moved to the single chair in the room, but didn't sit, resting his hands on its back instead. Better. Marginally. A light knock and the door opened. Dr. Evans was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a brisk, competent manner. Evelyn? And you must be. She glanced at her chart. Dominic. Yes, he said, his voice formal. The father. The simple declaration, spoken so matter-of-factly in this clinical space, sent a jolt through Evelyn. Wonderful. It's good to have support. Dr. Evans smiled warmly at Evelyn. So, based on your last menstrual cycle, we're estimating you at about 9 weeks. Today we'll do a transvaginal ultrasound to get a clear look, confirm the due date, and most excitingly, listen for that heartbeat. Sound good? Evelyn could only nod, her throat tight. The procedure was awkward, intimate, and utterly surreal. Dominic's gaze was fixed on the dark monitor as Dr. Evans worked. Evelyn watched his profile, saw the fierce concentration there, the slight parting of his lips. Then a grainy black and white image flickered to life on the screen. A small bean-shaped blur with a tiny flickering light at its center. There we are, Dr. Evans said, her voice softening. That's your baby. And see that flicker? That's the heartbeat. A rapid rhythmic whoosh 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 filled the room, swift and strong, like the sound of galloping horses heard from far away. Evelyn's breath caught. Tears, hot and immediate, sprang to her eyes. She looked from the screen to Dominic. He had gone perfectly still. All the rigid control had drained from his face, leaving behind something raw and utterly defenseless. Wonder. Awe. His eyes glistened in the dim light, fixed on that flickering light, listening to the primal proof of life they'd created. He reached out, his hand finding hers on the table. His grip was strong, almost crushing, but she held on just as tightly. An anchor in the emotional tide. It was real. Their baby had a heartbeat. Strong and healthy, Dr. Evans said, clicking measurements on the screen. Everything looks perfect. Due date looks to be right around the end of October. A Halloween baby. The absurd thought made a wet laugh bubble out of Evelyn, mingling with a sob. Dominic's thumb stroked over her knuckles, a silent, steady rhythm that matched the one on the monitor. The rest of the appointment passed in a blur: vitamins, diet advice, a list of symptoms to watch for. Dominic asked quiet, intelligent questions about exercise, travel, and nutritional requirements. His businesslike demeanor returned, but gentler now. He was filing everything away, building a plan. Evelyn felt dazed, euphoric, and terrifyingly tender as they walked out into the bright hallway, her hand clutching a grainy printout of the ultrasound image. A Halloween baby, Dominic murmured, looking down at the picture in his own hand as if it were a holy relic. Maybe a little vampire, she quipped, her voice still thick. He smiled, a real, unguarded smile that lit his eyes. As long as it has your smile. The moment was so perfect, so fragile, that the universe seemed to demand a counterbalance. They turned the corner toward the lobby elevators, and the world shattered. Nathaniel stood there, looking rumpled and agitated, outside the doorway of the maternity ward. In his arms was a tightly wrapped bundle of blue blanket. Brielle stood beside him, pale and tired, but with a triumphant gleam in her eyes that faded the moment she saw them. Time seemed to slow, then snap back with vicious speed. Nathaniel's gaze jerked from Dominic to Evelyn, taking in their proximity, the emotional rawness on their faces, the folder from the OBGYN clinic in her hand. His eyes dropped to the ultrasound photo Dominic still held. Confusion, then dawning horrific comprehension. Evelyn. Nathaniel's voice was a disbelieving croak. What are you? He looked at Dominic, then back at her stomach, his face bleaching of all color. You're pregnant. Dominic moved instantly. He didn't step in front of her, but he shifted his body, placing himself subtly between Evelyn and Nathaniel, his posture shifting from softened awe to protective alertness. It was a silent, potent declaration. That's none of your concern, Nathaniel, Dominic said, his voice colder than Evelyn had ever heard it. None of my. Nathaniel's voice rose, drawing looks from a passing nurse. The baby in his arms stirred. She's my wife. Ex-wife, Evelyn said, the word like ice. She found her voice, cold and clear, cutting through the toxic fog of his presence. The vulnerability of the ultrasound room was gone, replaced by the steely resilience that had gotten her through the divorce. The papers are final. Remember. He stared at her, his jaw working. Rage and something else, betrayal, perhaps the hypocrite's favorite currency, twisted his features. With him? You're having a baby with him? My uncle. The word was a snarl of disgust. Brielle made a small, sharp sound of vindication, her eyes glittering. I knew you were never as pure as you pretended. Dominic's head turned slowly toward Brielle. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The sheer, glacial contempt in his gaze was enough to make her flinch and take a half-step back. "You will not speak to her," he said, each word a chip of ice. "You have forfeited that right 1,000 times over." Nathaniel, stung by the rebuke to his new wife and inflamed by his own fury, took a threatening step forward. "You stay away from her, you pathetic." It happened too fast for Evelyn to process. Nathaniel swung his free arm, a clumsy, rage-fueled punch aimed at Dominic's head. Dominic didn't even shift his feet. He caught Nathaniel's wrist midair with one hand, his grip so forceful Nathaniel gasped, the baby letting out a startled wail. Dominic held him there, immobilized, his expression one of utter disdainful calm. "You are holding an infant," Dominic said, his voice low and deadly. "Act like it." He released the wrist with a slight push that sent Nathaniel staggering back a step, clutching the baby closer. Nathaniel's face was a mask of humiliated fury, breathing heavily. Evelyn stepped forward then, not behind Dominic but beside him. She looked at her ex-husband, at the red-faced baby in his arms, the child he had chosen over her, the child born of betrayal. She felt no anger, only a profound, chilling pity. "Yes, Nathaniel, I'm pregnant," she said, her voice carrying in the hushed hallway. She glanced at the squalling bundle. "Congratulations on your son, by the way. You might want to get a DNA test." She let her gaze flicker to Betrayal, whose triumphant smirk had frozen into a rictus of shock. "I'm beginning to think you were the problem all along." The color drained from Nathaniel's face completely, replaced by a sickly gray. He looked down at the baby, then at Betrayal, whose eyes were wide with panic. The seed of doubt, once planted by Evelyn's infidelity accusation months ago, now sprouted into a monstrous, consuming weed. Dominic placed a hand lightly on the small of Evelyn's back. "We're leaving." He guided her toward the elevators, a solid, unshakable wall between her and the ruin of her past. As the elevator doors closed, cutting off the sight of Nathaniel's shattered expression and Betrayal's panic, Evelyn let out a shuddering breath. She leaned against the wall, the adrenaline leaving her trembling. Dominic was watching her, his earlier warmth gone, replaced by a fierce protectiveness. "Are you all right?" She looked up at him, at the man who had caught a punch without breaking stride, who had placed himself as her shield without a second thought, whose first question was for her well-being. She thought of the wonder on his face listening to their baby's heartbeat. The last of her resistance, the final wall around her heart didn't crumble. It simply evaporated. "I am now," she whispered. And for the first time she believed it. Chapter 4. The incident at the hospital left a ripple of tension in its wake, but it was a clarifying one. For Evelyn it severed the last, ghostly tether to her former life. Nathaniel's rage, Betrayal's panic, they were echoes from a tomb. The future was the steady, protective presence beside her, and the tiny, flickering heartbeat now safely preserved on her phone. Dominic, true to his word, didn't smother. But his presence became a constant, thoughtful architecture around her new reality. A premium prenatal yoga class membership appeared in her inbox. A water bottle that glowed to remind her to drink was delivered to her desk. He didn't comment when she started wearing softer, lower heels. Work became a fascinating study in duality. In meetings he was Mr. Black. Demanding, brilliant, and ruthlessly fair. He challenged her, praised her, and treated her with the same professional respect he afforded everyone. But sometimes when she was presenting, she'd catch his gaze and see the stormy gray eyes soften just for a moment before they flicked back to the data on the screen. It was after work where the lines blurred. A week after the appointment, she came home to find him waiting in the hall outside her apartment, 2 large boxes at his feet. "What's all this?" she asked, key hovering at the lock. "Security upgrade," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "After the hospital, and given the publicity your divorce attracted, it's a precaution. A camera for your door. A more sophisticated system for your windows. I've already installed the same in my unit." She wanted to protest the intrusion, but the memory of speculative tabloid headlines during the divorce, and the sheer, exposed feeling she'd had in the hospital hallway stopped her. This wasn't control. It was a practical, proactive shield. "You didn't have to do it yourself," she said, unlocking the door. "I trust my own work." He shouldered one of the boxes and followed her in. For the next 2 hours, he worked with quiet, efficient focus, drilling, wiring, configuring an app on her phone. He moved through her space with a respectful awareness, not touching anything that wasn't his to touch. Evelyn worked at her small table, trying to ignore the scent of him, clean sweat and cedar, and the sheer domestic absurdity of the scene. Dominic Black, tech billionaire, on his knees installing a security sensor on her 5th-floor studio window. "There," he said finally, standing and wiping his hands on his jeans. "All set. The feed is private, encrypted. Alerts go to you, and if you don't respond, to me." He met her eyes. "I hope it's never needed. But it's there." "Thank you," she said, and meant it. "Can I offer you a drink? Water? I have decaf tea." He hesitated, then nodded. Tea would be good. They sat at her small table, mugs steaming between them. The silence was companionable, charged with the unspoken events of the day and the weeks before. "He won't bother you again," Dominic said abruptly, his voice low. Evelyn looked up from her tea. "Nathaniel. I had a conversation with him. He understands that any contact with you, directly or through intermediaries, will have significant legal and financial consequences. For him and for his partner." She didn't ask for details. The finality in his tone was enough. He had handled it as efficiently as he'd handled the security system. The relief was so profound it felt like a physical weight lifting from her chest. She hadn't realized how much subconscious energy she'd been spending waiting for the other shoe to drop. "You didn't have to do that either." "Yes," he said simply, holding her gaze. "I did." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. "I did. Because you're mine to protect. Because our child is mine to protect. Because it's my responsibility and my privilege." Evelyn's throat tightened. She looked down, tracing the rim of her mug. "The baby kicked. Today. I think. Felt like butterfly wings. Or gas." She gave a self-conscious laugh. Dominic went utterly still. The intensity of his focus was almost overwhelming. "You felt it." "Just a fluttering. It might have been my imagination." "Tell me," he commanded softly. "What did it feel like?" "Exactly." So she did. She described the strange, alien, wonderful sensation, and he listened as if she were describing the most critical piece of code he'd ever encountered. When she finished, he leaned back, a look of profound awe on his face. "I can't wait to feel it," he murmured, almost to himself. The intimacy of the moment was a live wire. It was too much, too fast, and yet it felt inevitable. Evelyn stood abruptly, taking the mugs to the sink. "It's getting late." He stood too, understanding the dismissal. "Of course. Get some rest." He paused at the door. The building's annual fire alarm system inspection is tomorrow. They'll be testing the alarms and the sprinklers in all units from 9 to 5. It's incredibly loud and they recommend residents vacate." She groaned. "I have a mountain of work. I was just going to put on noise-canceling headphones." "I wouldn't." He shook his head. "The vibrations are awful. My penthouse is fully insulated against it. You could work there. The view is better. And it's quiet." It was a blatant setup. A transparent ploy for forced proximity. She saw it. He saw that she saw it. She should say no. She should go to a coffee shop or the library. But the thought of a quiet, spacious place to work, of not being alone in her tiny vibrating box for 8 hours, and the thought of spending the day in his space, seeing how he lived. "Okay," she said before she could overthink it. "That would be helpful. Thank you." A slow, satisfied smile touched his lips. "I'll leave the door unlocked. Come up whenever." The penthouse wasn't what she expected. She'd imagined cold modernity. Chrome, glass, minimalist art that cost more than her car. Instead, she stepped into warmth. Rich darkwood floors. Walls painted a deep, calming navy. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panorama of the city, but the view was framed by overloaded bookshelves, a worn leather armchair with a blanket tossed over its back, and a grand piano that looked well-used. It was a home. A lived-in, comfortable, intensely personal home. It smelled like him, cedar, old books, and coffee. Dominic was at a large, standing desk in the corner, already immersed in work. He glanced up. "Make yourself at home. Kitchen's fully stocked. Office is through there if you want a desk. Or the couch is comfortable. I have a call in 10 that'll take an hour." He was giving her space. A tour would have been awkward. This was practical, respectful. Thanks, she said, setting her bag down. She chose the couch, pulling out her laptop. True to his word, the space was tomb quiet. The only sound was the faint click of his keyboard and the low murmur of his voice when his call began. She found herself glancing at him. The focused furrow of his brow, the way he gestured with one hand while he talked, the sheer command in his posture even when alone she worked, the afternoon sun warming the room. At one point she got up to get water. His kitchen was chef's quality but showed signs of use. A fancy espresso machine, a knife block with well-worn handles, a bowl of lemons on the counter. As she filled her glass, her eyes caught on the refrigerator. Held by a simple magnet was a photograph. It was faded, slightly blurry, as if taken from a distance. It showed a younger version of herself, standing on a university auditorium stage. Her hair was longer, pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was pointing at a projection screen, her face alight with passion, a radiant, confident smile on her lips. Her final project presentation. The glass nearly slipped from her hand. She remembered that day. The nerves, the thrill, the exhaustion. She had no idea a picture had been taken. And he had kept it. For years, her heart began a slow, heavy thud against her ribs. She turned slowly. His call had ended. He was standing by his desk, watching her. He'd seen her find it. His expression was unreadable. But there was no guilt, no embarrassment. Just a quiet, patient waiting. You were there, she whispered. I was invited as a guest lecturer. A success story from the alumni. His voice was low. You were presenting your senior thesis on adaptive neural networks for data security. I sat in the back. She remembered the panel of judges, the faculty. She didn't remember him. You never came to say hello. I wanted to. He took a step toward her, then stopped, as if forcing himself to keep the distance. You were 22. Brilliant, shining, so full of fire. I was 28, feeling 1,000 years old, building a company that consumed my soul. The gap felt insurmountable. And I was nervous. He admitted it like a secret. So I left. The admission was more shocking than the photo. Dominic Blackwood, nervous. And then, she prompted, her voice barely audible. And then a month later, Nathaniel brought you to a family dinner. A shadow passed over his face. He introduced you as his girlfriend. My heart. He shook his head, a rough, humorless laugh escaping him. I didn't attend the wedding. The pieces snapped together with dizzying, devastating clarity. His distance over the years. His occasional, intense looks she brushed off as disapproval. His immediate, fierce protectiveness after the divorce. The joy that wasn't just about the baby but about her. He hadn't stepped into her life by accident. He had been waiting at the periphery of it for years. All this time. The question was a breath. All this time, he confirmed, his gaze holding hers, stormy and sincere. Loving you silently was the easiest and hardest thing I've ever done. Watching him hurt you was a special kind of hell. Now, he took a final step, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his eyes, feel the heat of his body. Now I finally have you. And I will spend every day of the rest of my life proving I'm nothing like him. And everything you deserve. He didn't touch her. He just stood there, offering his truth like a weapon she could use against him, leaving himself utterly vulnerable. Evelyn looked from his earnest, fierce face to the faded photo on the fridge, a moment of her past he had cherished in secret. The final wall around her heart didn't just break. It dissolved into stardust. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and touched his chest, over the steady, strong beat of his heart. Okay, she whispered, the word a surrender and a beginning all at once. This time when he smiled it was like the sun breaking through a lifetime of clouds. Chapter 5. The admission hung in the air between them. A bridge built of years of silent longing now crossed. Dominic didn't move to pull her closer. Didn't try to capitalize on the vulnerability he just laid bare. He simply stood there, letting her absorb it, letting her feel the weight and the truth of it. Evelyn's hand remained on his chest, the solid thump of his heart a steady drum against her palm. All this time, she repeated, not as a question now, but as a marvel. The faded photo, his distance at family gatherings, his immediate, almost violent protectiveness after Nathaniel's betrayal. It all rewrote itself in her mind's eye. Not as indifference or familial duty, but as a man holding himself back from a precipice. It wasn't a burden, he said softly, as if reading the sorrow in her eyes. It was a privilege. To see you shine even from afar. She shook her head, a wry, tearful smile touching her lips. You have a strange definition of privilege. Watching me make terrible life choices. Watching you survive them, he corrected, his voice gaining strength. Watching you get back up. Every time. That's not a choice, Evelyn. That's your character. And it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. The words were too much. Too generous, too seeing. She let her hand fall, turning back to the photo to ground herself. I looked so young. You were brilliant. You still are. He came to stand beside her, his shoulder nearly brushing hers as he looked at the image. That smile. It lit up the entire auditorium. I think it altered my biochemistry. The quiet, scientific hyperbole made her laugh, the sound shaky but real. The emotional intensity of the moment began to recede, leaving behind a new, profound clarity. The ground beneath her feet had shifted, but it felt solid for the first time in years. The muffled shriek of a fire alarm, startlingly loud even through the penthouse's insulation, shattered the quiet. They both jumped. Ah, Dominic said, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features. The 5-minute warning before they test the main system. It'll be deafening for about 30 seconds. Right. The inspection. The reason she was here. The convenient excuse that had led to this as predicted. A moment later, a brain-rattling, pulsating shriek filled the building. Dominic didn't flinch, just watched her, a faint, knowing smile on his lips as she winced. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped, leaving a ringing silence that felt even louder. See, he said. Not conducive to productivity. Point taken, she conceded, her ears still buzzing. The spell was broken, but the connection remained, humming between them like a newly established circuit. The rest of the afternoon passed in a new kind of harmony. She returned to her work on the couch, but now she was hyper-aware of him. The scratch of his pen, the quiet sigh he made when he solved a problem. He brought her a cup of herbal tea without asking, placing it on the coaster beside her laptop. She murmured her thanks, their eyes meeting in a brief, electric acknowledgement. He ordered lunch. A vibrant, healthy salad for her, a hearty sandwich for himself. They ate at the large dining table, conversation flowing easily about work, about a new art exhibit at the City Museum, about nothing of consequence and everything that mattered. It was terrifyingly normal, terrifyingly right. When the light outside began to soften into evening gold, Evelyn packed her bag. She felt a strange reluctance to leave the warm, book-lined sanctuary. Thank you, she said at the door. For the quiet. And for the truth. He leaned against the doorjamb, his frame filling the space. The truth is long overdue. You don't have to say anything, Evelyn. You don't have to feel anything you're not ready for. Just let me be here. It was the same plea, stripped now of its strategic framing. Let me be here. She nodded, emotion swelling in her chest. Okay. The days that followed were a study in gradual, deliberate integration. Dominic didn't push. He simply existed in her orbit with a new, quiet certainty. He started joining her for dinner a few nights a week, always in her apartment, always bringing the food. He'd ask about her day, listen intently to her technical challenges, offer brilliant, offhand insights that would solve hours of frustration. He never overstayed, always cleaning up before he left with a soft, "Sleep well, Evelyn." One evening, she mentioned offhandedly that her lower back was aching. The next day, a state-of-the-art, ergonomic office chair was delivered to her apartment, along with a note, *for home use. The office one is on order. *. She ran her hands over the smooth leather, a lump in her throat. It wasn't the expense. It was the observation. He'd noticed her shifting in her seat at work. He'd anticipated the need before she'd fully voiced it. Her pregnancy began to manifest more visibly. A gentle, firm curve replaced the flatness of her stomach. The fluttery kicks became distinct, assertive nudges. The first time one happened while they were sitting on her couch watching a documentary, she gasped. What? Dominic was on alert instantly. Here, she said, grabbing his hand before she could think. She placed it on the side of her belly, over the soft cotton of her dress. They waited, frozen. For a moment, nothing. Then a solid, unmistakable thump against his palm. Dominic's breath caught. His eyes flew to hers, wide with wonder. That's another kick, stronger this time. Right against the center of his hand, a slow, dazzling smile spread across his face, transforming his usually solemn features. He looked back at her belly, his hand spreading, as if trying to catch the sensation. "Hello in there," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. Evelyn watched him, her heart doing a slow, painful somersault. This was the man who commanded boardrooms, whose name inspired respect and fear in the tech world. Here he was, on his knees metaphorically and almost literally, utterly captivated by the proof of their child. He looked up at her, the smile softening into something more profound. "Thank you." "For what?" "For this. For letting me feel that." He didn't remove his hand. The warmth of his palm seeped through the fabric, a comforting, possessive weight. "For letting me in." She covered his hand with hers, lacing their fingers together over the life growing inside her. It was an answer in itself. The real test came on a rainy Thursday. Evelyn had a difficult, cross-departmental meeting that ran long and left her frustrated and drained. All she wanted was a hot bath and silence. She was fumbling with her keys when her phone buzzed. A notification from the security app Dominic had installed. Motion detected. Main door. She frowned, pulling up the live feed. A figure stood in the hallway, huddled under a dripping umbrella. Nathaniel. Her blood ran cold. All the peace of the last few weeks evaporated. He looked desperate, disheveled, a far cry from the arrogantly handsome man she'd married. Before panic could fully take root, her phone rang. "Dominic." "I see him," he said, his voice a calm, low vibration that instantly grounded her. "Do not open the door. Do not engage. I'm on my way down." "Dominic, you don't have to. I'm already in the elevator." The line went dead. Evelyn stood frozen, watching the tiny screen. Nathaniel raised a fist to knock, then seemed to think better of it, slumping against the wall. He looked broken. Less than a minute later, Dominic stepped into the frame. He didn't look angry. He looked coldly, implacably authoritative. He said something to Nathaniel, too low for the microphone to pick up. Nathaniel jerked upright, his face twisting into a snarl. Gesturing wildly, Dominic didn't move. He simply listened, then spoke again, short and sharp. Nathaniel's defiance crumpled. He seemed to shrink. He cast one last, agonized look at Evelyn's door, then turned and shuffled toward the stairwell, defeated. Dominic watched him go, then turned to her door. He didn't knock. He just looked directly into the camera, his gaze seeking hers through the lens. He gave a single, slight nod, "It's handled," and then he was gone, back to the private elevator. Evelyn unlocked the door and stepped out into the empty hall. The only trace of the confrontation was a small puddle of rainwater. She leaned against the doorframe, her legs weak. Dominic hadn't asked for details. He hadn't demanded she explain. He had seen a threat to her peace and he had neutralized it, efficiently and completely, then retreated to give her space. No drama. No posturing. Just action. It was the most powerful demonstration of care she had ever witnessed. Back inside, her phone chimed. "Dominic. He won't be back. He's been served with a restraining order based on the hospital incident, and his subsequent attempts to contact you through third parties. The DNA test came back. The child isn't his. He's lost everything." "Evelyn. Thank you, Dominic. You never have to thank me for that." She stared at the messages, the final pieces of her resistance melting away. He wasn't just protecting the mother of his child. He was protecting her. Evelyn. The woman he'd loved silently for years. The woman she was starting to believe she could be again. With him, she typed back, her fingers steady. "Evelyn. Come over for dinner. I'm cooking." Chapter 6. The invitation hung in the digital space between them for a full minute before three dots appeared, pulsed, and his reply came. "Dominic. I'll be there in 20. Evelyn's kitchen was a testament to single life and recent survival, functional, but not inspired. She stared into her nearly bare fridge with a sense of mild panic. She'd issued the invitation on a surge of gratitude and emotion, not meal planning logic. She had eggs. Pasta. A jar of marinara sauce of questionable vintage. Some wilting spinach.it would have to do. She was whisking eggs with more force than necessary when a soft knock sounded at her door. Not the buzzer downstairs. He'd used his key to the building's main door, a privilege she'd given him after the security system installation. This was him, respecting the boundary of her personal space. She opened the door. He stood there, having changed from his work clothes into dark jeans and a simple black sweater. In his hands were 2 reusable grocery bags, full to bursting. "I come bearing supplies," he said, a tentative quirk to his lips. "In case your definition of cooking was toast." The tension in her shoulders broke. She laughed, stepping aside. "It was heading toward suspicious omelets. You saved us." He moved past her, his presence immediately making her small kitchen seem even smaller, but in a way that felt full, not cramped. He began unpacking with an efficiency that was fascinating to watch. Fresh basil, ripe tomatoes, garlic, a chunk of Parmesan, a bottle of olive oil, a baguette still warm from the oven, dark chocolate and raspberries. "I didn't know what you were planning, so I covered the basics," he said, rolling up his sleeves. He filled a pot with water for the pasta without asking where anything was, as if he'd mentally mapped her kitchen weeks ago. "You're taking over my gesture," she said, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. There was no heat in it. He glanced at her, a spark in his stormy eyes. "Your gesture was the invitation. This is the execution. Teamwork." He handed her the bread and a knife. "You can be in charge of slicing. No pressure." She took the knife, their fingers brushing. A simple domestic current passed between them. She sliced the bread while he minced garlic with quick, precise chops. He didn't command the space. He simply inhabited it, working alongside her. The silence was comfortable, filled with the sizzle of garlic hitting warm oil, the earthy scent of basil, the soft sound of her knife on the crusty loaf. "What did you say to him?" she asked quietly, not looking up from the breadboard. "Nathaniel." In the hall. Dominic's chopping didn't falter. "I reminded him of the legal reality, the restraining order, the financial penalties for violating it. I informed him of the paternity results." He paused, setting down the knife. "And I told him that if he ever caused you a moment of distress again, he would answer to me in ways the courts can't touch." She looked up then. His expression was calm, but his eyes were like flint. It wasn't a boast. It was a fact. "You didn't yell," she observed. "Yelling is for people who aren't sure they'll be heard." He drained the pasta, steam billowing around him. "He heard me." He had. She'd seen it on the camera feed. The way Nathaniel had deflated. Dominic's power wasn't in volume. It was an utter, unshakable certainty. He was a man who made promises he could, and would, keep. That he plated the food. Simple pasta aglio e olio with fresh tomatoes and basil, the bread on the side. They sat at her small table, knees almost touching underneath. "This is amazing," she said after the first bite. The flavors bursting, simple and perfect. "It's just pasta." But he looked pleased. "It's not just pasta." She took a breath, setting her fork down. "Dominic, all of this. The security, handling Nathaniel, the chair. Knowing I like dark chocolate with raspberries, the photo." She met his gaze, holding it. "It's a lot. I'm trying to understand the language." He mirrored her, setting his own fork down, giving her his complete attention. "What language?" "The language you're using. It's not flowers or grand gestures. It's observation, anticipation, action. It's fixing a problem before I fully feel it. It's remembering a smile from 7 years ago. It's removing obstacles I didn't even know were still there." Her voice softened. "I was fluent in a different language for a long time. One of neglect and criticism. I'm learning to translate yours." He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. His palm was warm, his touch firm. "The translation is simple, Evelyn. It's I see you. All of you. The brilliant engineer. The resilient survivor. The woman who loves terrible reality TV when she thinks no one's watching. The mother of my child. I see you, and what I see I cherish. And I will spend every day making sure you feel cherished. In every language you understand." Tears pricked her eyes, hot and insistent. She didn't fight them. They were tears of relief of a long cold thaw. She turned her hand under his, lacing their fingers together. "I'm starting to feel it," she whispered. After dinner, he insisted on cleaning up. She protested, but he shooed her to the couch. "Sit. Rest. You're growing a human," which is significantly more impressive than washing a pan. She obeyed, curling into the corner of the sofa, listening to the domestic sounds from her kitchen. When he finished, he didn't leave. He came to sit on the other end of the couch, a respectful distance away, picking up the book she'd left on the side table, a dense technical manual. "Light reading?" he asked, a smile in his voice. "It's for the project. It's actually fascinating the way they've approached the—" He held up a hand, laughing softly. "You don't have to justify it to me. I find your brain incredibly sexy." The word, spoken so casually, hung in the air. Sexy. It wasn't about her changing body, though she knew he found that beautiful too. It was about her mind, her competence. It was the ultimate antidote to years of being made to feel small. The baby chose that moment to deliver a series of vigorous kicks, as if in agreement. Evelyn gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. "What?" Dominic was immediately alert, leaning forward. "Just an active one." She smiled, taking his hand and placing it where the activity was. He held his breath, waiting. A powerful rolling movement shifted under his palm, distinct and undeniable. "Incredible," he breathed, his face a canvas of awe. He left his hand there, his thumb making small, absent circles. "Does it hurt?" "No. It's just strange. Wonderful." They sat like that for a long time, his hand on her belly, her head resting back against the cushions, in a silence that was richer than any conversation. The rain pattered against the window. The city lights blurred into a soft, golden haze. Evelyn felt something settle deep within her, a peace she hadn't known she was capable of. This was what safety felt like. Not just the absence of threat, but the presence of unwavering care. "Stay," she heard herself say into the quiet. The word was barely a whisper, but it echoed in the still room. Dominic's hand stilled on her stomach. He looked at her, his eyes searching hers in the dim light. He understood the weight of the invitation. It wasn't just about tonight. "On the couch," she clarified, though they both knew the clarification was for formality's sake. The trust was there, but the physical step was still a bridge they were approaching with care. "Of course," he said, his voice thick. He leaned over, and for a heart-stopping moment, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he pressed his lips gently to her forehead. A kiss of reverence and promise. "I'll be right here." Later, as she lay in her bed, she could hear the faint, comfortable sounds of him making up the couch in the other room. The soft rustle of sheets, the creak of the frame as he lay down. A deep, contented sigh. For the first time in her adult life, Evelyn fell asleep feeling not alone but accompanied, guarded, cherished. And in the living room, Dominic Blackwood lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling of her apartment, a fierce, possessive joy burning in his chest. He was in her space. She had asked him to stay. It was a foothold on the mountain he'd been gazing at for years. He would not rush. He would not scare her. But he was here. And he was never letting go. Chapter 7. Waking up with Dominic in her apartment was a study in quiet surrealism. Evelyn emerged from her bedroom to find the couch neatly made, the blankets folded with military precision. The scent of fresh coffee and something sweet, cinnamon, filled the air. He was in the kitchen, his back to her, flipping something in a pan. He moved with the same focused efficiency he applied to everything, but there was a new relaxed fluidity to it. This wasn't a CEO in a boardroom. This was a man making breakfast in a sun-dappled kitchen. "Good morning," she said, her voice still sleep-rough. He turned, a soft smile touching his lips. "Morning. I found pancake mix. Hope that's okay. I made a blueberry compote. The internet says antioxidants are good." "The internet is very invested in this pregnancy," she quipped, patting over to peer into the pan. "He's not the only one." He plated 2 golden pancakes, drizzled them with the deep purple compote, and handed her the plate. "How did you sleep?" "Really well, actually." It was true. The strange, protective aura of his presence in the next room had been a better sleep aid than any pill. "You." The couch is surprisingly comfortable. He poured her a glass of orange juice and slid it across the counter. But I'd trade it for a floor if it meant being nearby. The honesty was so blunt, so devoid of guile, it stole her breath. She busied herself with cutting into the pancakes to hide the flush on her cheeks. They were perfect, light, fluffy. The tart sweet compote a perfect complement. You can cook, she stated. I can follow instructions. Cooking is just another kind of system. He leaned against the opposite counter, watching her eat with a satisfaction that seemed to have nothing to do with his own meal. They fell into an easy rhythm over the next week. The stay had opened a door, and they both cautiously stepped through. He didn't assume, he asked, "Can I come over? Do you need anything from the store? Would you like to watch a movie?" His penthouse became their shared weekend space. A place of light and books and that breathtaking view where she could sprawl on the huge sectional with her feet in his lap as he read reports, his fingers absently tracing circles on her ankle point. One Saturday afternoon, she was curled in his leather armchair, deeply engrossed in a novel, when she noticed him at his grand piano. He wasn't playing, just sitting on the bench, staring at a sheet of music with an intense frown. "What's wrong?" she asked, marking her page. He looked up, as if surprised she was there. "This piece. I've been trying to get the phrasing right for weeks. It's supposed to sound effortless, but it keeps coming out strained." Evelyn knew he played. She'd heard the occasional beautiful, complex melodies drifting from the penthouse late at night when she couldn't sleep, but she'd never seen him work at it. Seeing this man who commanded billions and entire industries wrestle with a few lines of music was oddly endearing. "Play it for me?" she asked. A flicker of self-consciousness crossed his face, so foreign on his features it was almost charming. "It's not ready. Neither is the baby, but we're still excited about it." He shot her a wry look, then sighed, turning back to the keys. His hands settled, and he began to play. The music was haunting, a melancholy classical piece that rose and fell like a difficult conversation. He was right. There was a tension in it, a hesitation in the left hand that broke the flow. He played through it once, then stopped, shaking his head in frustration. Evelyn stood and walked over, leaning against the side of the piano. "Can I see the sheet?" He handed it to her. She knew nothing about piano, but she understood patterns, sequences, logic. She traced the notes with her finger. "Here," she said, pointing. "This transition. You're treating it like a hard stop, but look, the notation suggests more of a glide. A breath between phrases, not a full stop." He looked from the sheet to her face, intrigued. "A breath. Like in code. You don't just end one function and brutally start the next. There's a handoff. A moment of suspension." She hummed the phrase, trying to demonstrate the fluidity she meant. He watched her, his eyes soft with something deeper than musical appreciation. "You see the music in code. I see patterns everywhere." She shrugged, suddenly feeling foolish. "Forget it. I don't know what I'm talking about." "No," he said, catching her wrist gently. "You're absolutely right." He turned back to the piano, his fingers finding the keys again. This time he played the troubled phrase with the slight hesitation she'd suggested. Not a stop, but a suspended breath. The music sighed, then flowed onward, seamless and heartbreakingly beautiful. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. He played the entire section again, the strain gone, replaced by a melancholic grace. When he finished, he looked up at her, his eyes shining. "You fixed it. I just pointed out a glitch. You debugged it." He stood, closing the small distance between them. He cupped her face, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "You see me," he whispered, echoing her own words back to her. "You see the things I struggle with. And you don't look away. You help." Her heart swelled, pressing against her ribs. She leaned into his touch. "It's what partners do." The word hung there. Partners. It was bigger than co-parents, more intimate than colleagues. It was a declaration she hadn't planned to make, but it felt truer than anything she'd said in years. His breath hitched. He dipped his head, his forehead resting against hers. "Evelyn," he breathed, her name a prayer. He was going to kiss her. She could feel it in the tension of his body, in the way his gaze dropped to her lips. And she wanted it. God, she wanted it. The memory of their one night was a phantom heat under her skin, but this would be different. This would be conscious, chosen, sober. But he didn't. He pulled back just an inch, his eyes searching hers. Not yet, he murmured as if to himself. I won't rush this. The restraint was more potent than any kiss could have been. It told her he wasn't just following a biological imperative or a sense of obligation. He was building something with intention, brick by careful brick. He stepped back, taking her hand instead. Come on. There's something I want to show you. He led her not to another room but to his home office, a space she'd rarely entered. It was dominated by a large drafting table, not a desk. Spread across it were not blueprints for skyscrapers or circuit boards, but architectural plans for a house. A home. Sunlight streamed across the detailed drawings. It showed a modern, low-slung structure with walls of glass overlooking a wooded landscape. An open floor plan, a chef's kitchen, a music room with space for a grand piano, and a wing with 2 large bedrooms connected by a shared, sunny space labeled nursery/playroom. Evelyn's throat closed. She traced a finger over the lines of the nursery. What is this? It's a plot of land I bought. North of the city. Quiet. Private. Good schools. He stood beside her, his shoulder brushing hers as he looked at the plans. This is a proposal. Not a decision. A proposal for what? Her voice was a whisper. For a future. Our future. A place where our child can have a garden to play in. A place where you can have a real office with a door that closes. A place where I can play the piano at midnight without worrying about the neighbors. He paused, his voice dropping. A home. For all 3 of us. She stared at the blueprints, her mind reeling. It was a monumental gesture. Yet, it wasn't a done deal shoved in her face. It was a proposal. Lines on paper, open for discussion, for revision. He was showing her the blueprint of his hopes and asking for her input. It's beautiful, she managed. But Dominic, my job. My life is here. In the city. I know. He tapped a section of the drawing. There's a dedicated studio apartment over the garage. For your mother, for a nanny, for you if you ever need absolute quiet. And the commute to the city is 40 minutes by helicopter. I've already priced hangar space. Of course he had. He hadn't just dreamed, he'd solved. He'd anticipated her objections and engineered solutions. She looked from the meticulous plans to his face. He was watching her, not with expectation, but with a vulnerable hope that made her chest ache. This wasn't about moving her to a gilded cage. It was about building a sanctuary together. I'm not saying yes, she said slowly. I'm not asking you to. I'm saying show me more. The bathroom layouts. The closet space. The security specs. A brilliant, triumphant smile broke across his face. He pulled out another, more detailed set of drawings. I was hoping you'd say that. For the next hour, they pored over the plans. She asked sharp, practical questions about wiring, about solar panel efficiency, about sightlines from the kitchen to the playroom. He answered everything, his eyes alight with passion. They debated, they compromised. She drew a quick sketch for a better pantry layout on a scrap of tracing paper. It was collaboration. It was partnership. It was the most romantic afternoon of her life. As the sun began to set, painting the plans in gold, Evelyn leaned back, a sense of profound rightness settling over her. She looked at the man beside her, her brilliant, patient, devastatingly thoughtful partner, and at the blueprint of a future they were designing together. He wasn't just giving her a house. He was giving her a voice in building their home. She reached out, took his hand, and laced their fingers together over the drawing of their child's future room. Okay, she said softly, meeting his gaze. Let's build it. Chapter 8. The collaborative energy of the house plans bled into everything. It was no longer Dominic orchestrating and Evelyn receiving. It was a constant, quiet dialogue. He'd text her links to eco-friendly flooring options. She'd reply with research on sound-dampening insulation for the music room. They debated heated bathroom floors versus radiant wall panels with the same intensity. They brought to quarterly financial projections. At work, the duality remained, but the undercurrent had changed. When she presented a breakthrough in her prototype security protocol, his nod of approval from the head of the table carried a private, glowing pride that only she could decipher. Once, after a particularly grueling meeting where she dismantled a competitor's proposal point by point, He stopped by her desk on his way out. "Page 32 of their technical appendix," he said, his voice low so only she could hear. "The latency figure they quoted is physically impossible with their stated infrastructure. You could have buried them with that." She looked up surprised. "I missed that." "I know. I wanted to see if they'd catch their own lie. They didn't." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Next time, hit them with it. Don't hold back." It was coaching. Empowerment. He wasn't just protecting her. He was making her sharper, more formidable. He believed in her competence absolutely, and that belief was a battery she could draw from. Her body continued its transformation. The gentle curve became a firm, undeniable swell. She had to buy new clothes, soft, flowing dresses and elastic waist trousers. Dominic never commented directly on her changing shape, but his eyes would follow her with a dark, possessive heat that made her skin flush. His touches became more frequent, more proprietary, a hand at the small of her back guiding her through a door, his fingers brushing hers when he handed her a cup of tea, his palm resting on the dome of her belly for longer periods, feeling the baby's now violent acrobatics. "She's going to be a soccer player," Evelyn groaned one evening, lying on his penthouse couch as a tiny foot visibly dragged from one side of her abdomen to the other. "Or a dancer," Dominic murmured, his hand chasing the movement. He was stretched out on the floor beside the couch, his head level with her stomach, utterly captivated. "Or a future CEO, practicing her negotiations." Evelyn laughed, running her fingers through his dark hair. The intimacy was so profound it felt dreamlike. "You're already assigning her careers. I'm assigning her potential." He turned his head, pressing a kiss to the taut fabric of her dress, right over the spot where a heel was currently lodged under her ribs. And her right to choose any of them. The 20-week anatomy scan loomed. The appointment circled in both their calendars with a mix of excitement and trepidation. This was the big one, the full check of development and the chance to learn the baby's sex. The ultrasound room felt familiar now, but the tension was different. This wasn't about confirmation, it was about revelation. The technician, a cheerful woman named Linda, moved the wand over Evelyn's gel-slicked stomach, clicking measurements, narrating her findings. "There's the spine, beautiful. 4-chamber heart, beating strong. Brain looks perfect. Kidneys, stomach, bladder, all present and accounted for." Linda smiled at the screen. "And someone is not being shy today. Would you like to know the sex?" Evelyn's hand tightened around Dominic's. They'd talked about it. They both wanted to know. Not for pink or blue, but to make the life inside her more specific, more real. To be able to say she or he instead of the baby. "Yes," they said in unison. Linda zoomed in. "Well, take a look right there." On the screen, clear as day amidst the grainy shadows, was the telltale confirmation. "It's a girl," Linda said warmly. "A girl. A daughter." Evelyn's breath left her in a soft whoosh. "A daughter." She looked at Dominic, tears already blurring her vision. He was staring at the screen, his face utterly still. Then a tremor went through him. His eyes locked on that indisputable proof, filled with the sheen of tears. His jaw worked but no sound came out. He brought Evelyn's hand to his lips and pressed a fervent, shaking kiss to her knuckles, his gaze never leaving the monitor where his daughter's image flickered. In that raw, silent moment, Evelyn saw it all. The fierce protector who would move heaven and earth for his little girl. The man who would teach her about logic and music, who would rage at her first heartbreak and beam with pride at her every achievement. The father he was already becoming. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. They left the clinic floating, clutching a new batch of pictures, profile shots, a perfect little foot, the revealing image now tucked discreetly at the bottom of the stack. They were in a bubble of joy, so bright and full it felt like they glowed. The bubble popped the moment they stepped into the hospital's main atrium. Nathaniel stood near the information desk, alone. He looked gaunt, hollowed out. The arrogant polish was gone, replaced by a desperate, feral energy. His eyes, bloodshot and haunted, locked onto them immediately, onto their joined hands, onto Evelyn's rounded belly now unmistakable beneath her coat. He moved toward them like a sleepwalker, his focus solely on Evelyn. "Evelyn, please, we need to talk." Dominic shifted instantly, putting his body between them. "You are violating a court order, Nathaniel. Turn around and walk away." Nathaniel didn't even look at him. His gaze was pleading, broken, fixed on her over Dominic's shoulder. You were right. The baby, he's not mine. Brielle, she was seeing someone else the whole time. The whole time. His voice cracked. I lost everything for a lie. You have to believe me, I never meant to. I was tricked. A part of Evelyn, the part that had loved him once, ached at the sheer devastation in his face. But a larger, harder part felt nothing but a cold, clear certainty. This was the consequence of his own choices, of his readiness to believe the worst of her, of his shallow values. I believe you were tricked, Nathaniel, she said, her voice calm and distant, as if observing a sad specimen under glass. But you chose to believe her over me. You chose to humiliate me, to discard me. You made your bed. I was wrong, he shouted, the sound echoing in the vaulted space. A few people turned to stare. Can't you see I'm being punished? Everything is gone. And you? His eyes dropped to her stomach again, a new, more personal agony twisting his features. You're having his baby. You moved on. You replaced me. Dominic's patience snapped. He took a single, deliberate step forward, forcing Nathaniel to stumble back. She didn't replace you, Dominic said, his voice a low, vibrating threat. She upgraded. Now you will leave. This is your last warning before I have you arrested in this hospital lobby. But Nathaniel was beyond hearing. The last threads of his control unraveled. You did this. He spat at Dominic, venom and grief mixing into something ugly. You always wanted her. You waited in the wings like a vulture. Dominic didn't flinch. I loved her respectfully from a distance while you had the privilege of her heart and treated it like trash. You don't get to rewrite history. You don't get to come crying now that your fantasy has collapsed. Walk away. The finality in Dominic's tone, the absolute lack of fear or doubt, seemed to finally pierce Nathaniel's hysteria. He looked from Dominic's implacable face to Evelyn's cool, resolved one. He saw no opening, no crack of pity. He saw a united front, impregnable. The fight drained out of him, leaving only a broken shell. His shoulders slumped. He cast one last, lost look at Evelyn, then turned and shuffled away, disappearing into the flow of people. The silence he left behind was heavy. Dominic turned to Evelyn, his hands coming up to cradle her face, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. Are you all right? Did he upset you? She leaned into his touch, the solid warmth of him grounding her. No, she said, and realized it was true. She felt no anger, no fear, no lingering pain. Only a profound sense of closure. He's just noise. A ghost. He searched her eyes, found only certainty there, and exhaled a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. He pressed his forehead to hers. Our daughter, he whispered, the words for her alone, a secret joy reclaimed from the ugliness. We're having a daughter. The joy came flooding back, washing away the last residue of the past. She smiled, her heart so full it hurt. Yes, we are. He kissed her then. Not on the forehead, not on the hand. He cupped her face and brought his lips to hers in a kiss that was tender and fierce, a claiming and a promise, a seal on their present and a vow for their future. It was their first real kiss since the night that started it all, and it tasted like hope, like safety, like home. When they finally parted, breathless, in the middle of the busy hospital atrium, Evelyn knew. The reluctance was gone. The fear was gone. All that was left was this man, this love that had waited so patiently, and their daughter waiting to join them. She took his hand, lacing their fingers tightly together. Take me home, she said. And for the first time she meant their home, wherever he was. Chapter 9. The world after the kiss held a different frequency. The air in Dominic's penthouse seemed charged, the city lights outside the windows sparkling with new significance. They didn't speak of it immediately. The kiss that had shifted everything from a slow, careful progression to a sudden, undeniable truth. They moved around each other in the kitchen, preparing a simple dinner, their hands brushing, their glances lingering. A silent, joyful communion at IT was over the meal that Evelyn finally gave voice to the change. It doesn't feel like a choice anymore, she said, pushing roasted vegetables around her plate. Loving you feels like a fact. Like gravity. Dominic set his fork down with deliberate care. The look he gave her was so open, so vulnerable it stole her breath. It has been a fact for me for 7 years, he said, his voice rough. Hearing you say it, it's the sound of my world finally aligning. I'm scared, she admitted, the confession a whisper. Not of you. Of how much I need this. How much I need you. He reached across the table, his hand enveloping hers. Then need me, Evelyn. I am the most reliable resource you will ever have. I have infinite capacity for you. The programmer in her appreciated the metaphor. He wasn't offering fleeting passion. He was offering a foundational, scalable stability. It was the sexiest thing anyone had ever said to her. That night he didn't go to the couch. They didn't discuss it. He simply followed her into her bedroom, his presence a quiet question. She answered by taking his hand and drawing him down beside her on the bed. They lay facing each other in the dark, fully clothed, simply holding one another. His arm was a heavy, welcome weight across her waist, his palms spread over their daughter. Her back was tucked against the solid wall of his chest. His breath warm on her neck. It was more intimate than any act of passion. It was trust given and received in the dark. The following weeks were a golden era. The house plans evolved from a proposal into a shared project. They spent weekends with the architect, a sharp-eyed woman who quickly learned to address her questions to both of them. Evelyn's input was not just accepted, it was sought. She designed a concealed, biometric lock server room adjacent to the home office. She argued for a larger, south-facing window in the nursery for maximum light. Dominic listened, nodded, and made it happen. One Saturday, they were reviewing tile samples for the master bathroom spread across his drafting table. Evelyn held up 2 shades of sea glass green. This one is more serene, but this has more depth. Dominic looked from the tiles to her face, a soft smile playing on his lips. You have an eye for this. I have an eye for what won't look dated in 5 years. She grinned. It's all just long-term system maintenance. He laughed, pulling her into his side and dropping a kiss on her temple. My practical, brilliant woman. The word "my" didn't feel possessive in a stifling way. It felt like a designation of belonging, of being part of his core architecture. She leaned into him, savoring it. Her pregnancy progressed into the 3rd trimester. Her energy flagged, her feet swelled, and sleep became a fleeting visitor. Dominic adapted seamlessly. He installed a soaking tub in her bathroom after catching her wincing as she lowered herself into the old one. He learned to give foot massages with a clinical focus on pressure points, his brow furrowed in concentration. He read pregnancy books not just for facts, but for strategies, sleeping positions, nutritional boosts, exercises for back pain. One night, she woke with a sharp, cramping pain in her side. A bolt of panic shot through her. Too early, something's wrong. Before she could even sit up fully, the bedside lamp clicked on. Dominic was already awake, his hand on her arm. What is it? Where does it hurt? She pointed, gasping as another cramp seized her. Here. It's too early, Dominic, it's... Breathe with me. His voice was calm, his hands already moving, one on her back, the other gently probing her side. Describe the pain. Sharp? Dull? Radiating? Sharp? Stabbing? Round ligament pain? He diagnosed after a moment, his shoulders relaxing a fraction. It's normal. The ligaments supporting your uterus are stretching. It feels like being stabbed, but it's not labor. He helped her sit up, guided her through slow stretches, brought her water. Within 20 minutes, the pain had subsided to a dull ache. She sat on the edge of the bed, trembling with relief and residual adrenaline. How did you know that? Chapter 14 of the Modern Pregnancy Guide, he said, sitting beside her and wiping a stray tear from her cheek with his thumb. I have a photographic memory for anything that concerns your well-being. He wasn't just caring for her. He was equipping himself to be her first responder. The realization that she was so thoroughly known, so meticulously safeguarded, was overwhelming. She leaned her head against his shoulder. I don't know what I did to deserve you. You existed, he said simply, his arm tightening around her. That was enough. The final threshold came unexpectedly. It was a Tuesday. Evelyn was at work, battling a stubborn bug in her code. The baby was particularly active, a constant, distracting drumroll against her ribs. Around 3 o'clock, a different sensation bloomed low in her belly. Not a kick, but a deep tightening squeeze that made her breath catch. It passed after 30 seconds. Braxton Hicks, she told herself. Practice contractions. She'd been having them for weeks. But an hour later another came. And another 40 minutes after that. They were irregular, not painful, just insistent. A primal signal her body was sending. Soon, she finished her work, a strange, quiet excitement threading through her. When Dominic came to walk her out, a new ritual, she didn't mention the tightenings. She wanted to hold the secret a little longer, to feel the portent of it alone that evening. As they cleaned up after dinner in her apartment, a contraction hit that was different. It didn't just tighten. It ached, a deep rhythmic pull that demanded her full attention. She gripped the edge of the counter, breathing through it. Dominic was at her side in an instant. Evelyn. It's stronger, she panted as the sensation ebbed. His eyes went from concern to sharply focused. Time it. It wasn't a suggestion. He pulled out his phone, opening a timer app. Tell me when the next one starts. They moved to the couch. For an hour they timed the waves. They were irregular, 8 minutes apart, then 12, then 7. But they were getting stronger. A deep rosy flush bloomed on Evelyn's skin with each one. It could be false labor, she said, wanting to temper the hope she saw blazing in his eyes. It could stop. It could, he agreed, his voice calm. But he was already in motion. He packed her hospital bag, which had been ready for a month. He called the obstetrician, relaying the timing and intensity in crisp, clear terms. He listened, nodded. She says to come in when they're 5 minutes apart for an hour. Or if your water breaks. Or if you just feel ready. Evelyn looked around her apartment, at the life she was about to leave behind in the most fundamental way. Fear, bright and sharp, lanced through the excitement. I'm scared, she whispered. Dominic knelt in front of her, taking both her hands. His gaze was steady, unwavering. Listen to me. You are the strongest person I know. Your body was made for this. And I will be with you for every single second. You are not alone. You will never be alone again. The words were a talisman. The fear receded, not gone but managed. She nodded. Okay. They waited through the night. Dominic didn't sleep. He sat with her, timing contractions, rubbing her back, offering sips of water, his presence a constant, steady hum of support. The contractions marched on, slowly organizing themselves into a predictable rhythm. As the first gray light of dawn touched the windows, they settled into a firm 5 minutes apart. Evelyn looked at Dominic, who was watching her, his face a mask of tender, fierce readiness. It's time, she said. A smile brilliant and full of awe broke across his face. He helped her to her feet, shouldered the bags, and kept an arm firmly around her as they walked to the door. On the threshold of her old life she paused. She looked back at the studio that had been her refuge, her prison, her cocoon. Then she looked up at the man beside her, her partner, her love, the father of her child. She was not crossing this threshold alone. She was crossing it hand in hand with her future. She took a deep, settling breath, squeezed his hand and stepped forward. Let's go meet our daughter. Chapter 10. The world narrowed to a tunnel of sensation and sound. The antiseptic brightness of the delivery room was a stark contrast to the soft, waiting dark of the night before. Evelyn was a creature of pure biology now, breathing through waves of pain that felt like her spine was being twisted from the inside. Clinging to Dominic's hand as if it were the only solid thing in a seismic universe, he was her anchor. He didn't flinch, didn't look away. He matched her breathing, his voice a low, steady counterpoint to her gasps. You're doing so well. Just like that. Perfect. When a contraction ripped through her, his hand was there for her to crush, his other arm supporting her back. He translated the medical jargon from the doctor and nurses into simple, actionable terms for her. They want you to try a different position now. Can you turn toward me? He was her advocate, her interpreter, her fortress. When she cried out that she couldn't do it, his voice brooked no argument. Yes, you can. You are. Look at me, Evelyn. You are the most powerful force in this room. And she believed him. Through the haze of pain and exhaustion, his absolute faith in her became her fuel. Hours blurred. The world dissolved into the cycle of crushing pressure and brief, precious respite. At some point, the doctor announced she was fully dilated. It's time to push, Evelyn. A new kind of fear, primal and electric, shot through her. This was the point of no return. Dominic's face filled her vision. His eyes, usually stormy gray, were dark pools of intensity. He brushed sweat-soaked hair from her forehead. "This is it, my love. You bring her to us now. I'm right here. My love." The endearment, spoken so naturally in the crucible of this moment, unlocked a final reserve of strength within her. She pushed. With every fiber, every scream she didn't have the breath to voice, she pushed. Dominic counted, encouraged, his voice hoarse with shared effort. The medical team's directives became a distant buzz. Her entire universe was the burning, stretching agony and Dominic's unwavering gaze holding hers. Then a sudden immense release of pressure. A slithering final push. And a sound, a thin, indignant, glorious wail that pierced the air. Evelyn collapsed back against the pillows, spent, trembling, her vision swimming. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, but Evelyn already knew. She knew in her soul, and then a warm, squirming, vernix-smeared bundle was placed on her chest. Time stopped, she looked down. A tiny, perfect face, eyes screwed shut, mouth open in a furious, mewling cry. A thatch of dark, wet hair. 10 impossibly small fingers, already curling into fists. Her daughter. Their daughter. A sob tore from Evelyn's throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. She touched a trembling finger to a velvet-soft cheek. "Hello," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Hello, my beautiful girl." She looked up, seeking Dominic. He was staring at the baby, tears streaming openly, unashamedly down his face. The sight of this formidable man, brought to his knees by 7 pounds of new life, shattered something beautiful inside her. He reached out a shaking hand, his finger, so large next to the tiny head, stroking the dark hair with infinite gentleness. "She's perfect," he breathed, his voice thick with awe. He leaned down, pressing a tear-streaked kiss to Evelyn's sweaty temple, then one to the baby's forehead. "You are both so perfect." The medical bustle continued around them, clamping, cutting, delivering the placenta, but for Evelyn and Dominic, the world had condensed to the 3 of them on that bed. A completed circuit. Once Evelyn was settled and the baby had been checked, weighed and swaddled, the nurse placed the bundle back in her arms. Dominic climbed onto the bed beside her, his body curving around them both, creating a protective cocoon. He couldn't stop touching, a finger tracing the baby's eyebrow, his palm resting on Evelyn's arm, his lips against her hair. "What shall we call her?" Evelyn whispered, exhausted but thrumming with a euphoric energy. They had a short list, but had waited to meet her. Dominic looked at their daughter's face, her features already hinting at a stubborn chin and his own strong brow. "She looks like a warrior," he murmured. "But one with your smile." He met Evelyn's eyes. "What do you feel?" Evelyn studied the little face, the rosebud mouth, the long lashes resting on plump cheeks. A name from their list floated up, one that had resonated with both of them. "I think she's Lyra." "Lyra," Dominic repeated, testing the name. It was strong, lyrical, celestial. A moon of Jupiter. A name for a girl who would chart her own orbit. A slow, wondrous smile spread across his face. "Yes, Lyra. Our star." He said it with such profound certainty that it sealed the truth. "Lyra. Their daughter." In the quiet that followed, as Lyra nuzzled sleepily against Evelyn's chest, Dominic spoke again, his voice a soft rumble against her. "Thank you." "For what?" she asked, her eyes drifting closed. "For her. For trusting me. For letting me love you." He paused, his arm tightening around them. "You have given me everything." Evelyn opened her eyes, turning her head to look at him. In his face she saw the culmination of 7 years of silent longing, of months of patient, steadfast care, of the ferocious joy of the last hours. She saw her present, her future, her home. "You gave me everything first," she whispered. They slept fitfully that night in the hospital room, Lyra in a clear bassinet between them. Every snuffling sound, every tiny cry, had them both instantly awake, reaching for her, for each other. It was a new, exquisite kind of exhaustion. The next morning, as pale sunlight filtered through the blinds, Dominic was already up, changing a diaper with a look of intense, comical concentration. He'd watched the nurse do it once and now executed the steps with the precision of a bomb disposal expert. Evelyn watched from the bed. A swell of love so vast it was almost painful filling her chest. This was her family, This brilliant, commanding man, utterly humbled and devoted to a tiny, wriggling person in a onesie. There was a soft knock on the door. Dominic, holding a freshly swaddled Lyra, looked at Evelyn, a question in his eyes. She nodded. It was Bethany, Evelyn's best friend, her eyes wide and brimming with tears. She took in the scene, Evelyn in bed, Dominic holding the baby, and her hands flew to her mouth. "Oh, Evie," she breathed, rushing forward. She hugged Evelyn fiercely, then turned to Dominic. Carefully, reverently, he transferred the tiny bundle into Bethany's waiting arms. "Meet Lyra," Evelyn said, her voice thick. Bethany looked down, her face transforming with wonder. "She's gorgeous. She has his frown and your nose." She looked between them, her expression turning sly and deeply satisfied. "So, this is the concerned party sending gourmet fruit salads." Evelyn laughed, a free, happy sound. "Beth, this is Dominic. Dominic, my chaos agent and best friend, Bethany." Dominic extended a hand, his expression warm but serious. "The one who orchestrated the grocery store vindication. It's an honor to meet the strategist." Bethany shook his hand, her eyes assessing and, after a moment, approving. "You'd better be as good as you look holding that baby Black." "I intend to be," he said, without a trace of humor. Later, after Bethany had left, promising to organize a meal train and threaten all their friends into compliance, Evelyn and Dominic were alone again with Lyra. The baby was nursing, her tiny hand splayed against Evelyn's skin. Dominic sat on the edge of the bed, watching them, his expression one of such profound contentment it made Evelyn's heart ache. "I want to marry you," he said, the words quiet, certain, as if commenting on the weather. Evelyn's breath caught. She looked from Lyra's peaceful face to his earnest one. There was no ring, no grand proposal. Just a statement of fact, a logical next step in the life he was building for them. "Is that a question?" she asked softly. "It's an intention. The question is, will you let me?" She thought of blueprints on a drafting table, of security sensors installed on his knees, of a kiss in a hospital atrium, of his hand steadying her through the storm of birth. She thought of 7 years of silent love, waiting for her to be ready. She looked at their daughter, at the living proof of their union, and then back at the man who had loved her through fire and into peace. "Yes," she said, the word a vow of its own. "I will." He didn't whoop or shout. He simply leaned in, capturing her lips in a kiss that was sweet and deep and full of a future yet to be written. Lyra, between them, gave a contented sigh. They were no longer two people stumbling toward each other, weighed down by pasts and fears. They were three. A family, forged in patience, sealed in trust, and launched into the brilliant, terrifying, beautiful unknown together. Chapter 11. The world outside the hospital ceased to exist for 3 days. It was a cocoon of sterile sheets, hushed voices, and the mesmerizing, all-consuming rhythm of Lyra. Evelyn existed in a blissful, exhausted haze, her body a map of new aches and profound satisfactions. Dominic was a constant, silent satellite, orbiting her and the baby. He mastered the swaddle, decoded different cries, and became an expert at handing Evelyn pillows, water, and snacks without her having to ask. When the pediatrician finally pronounced Lyra perfect and Evelyn cleared to go home, a new kind of anxiety prickled. Home. But which one? Her studio apartment, with its single bed and barely their kitchen? Or the penthouse, spacious but still his? Dominic solved it without discussion. He'd already had a car seat installed in his SUV. He packed their few belongings, carefully buckled Lyra, who looked impossibly small in the cavernous seat, and then turned to Evelyn, offering his arm. "Ready to go home?" She didn't hesitate. She took his arm. Home was wherever he and Lyra were. The penthouse had been transformed in their absence. The spacious, open living area now featured a sleek bassinet beside the grand piano, a changing station stocked with military precision, and a deep, plush glider by the window. Soft, neutral blankets were folded over the back of the sofa. It wasn't a nursery, it was an integration. Their life now including her. "I had help," he admitted, seeing her look around. "Bethany. And a very discreet baby planner." Of course he had. He'd anticipated every need, delegating where necessary, but the personal touches, the glider positioned for the best light, a framed copy of the first ultrasound photo on the bookshelf, were all him. The first night was a beautiful, sleep-deprived chaos. Lyra, no longer soothed by the hospital's constant ambient noise, fussed. Evelyn, her milk coming in with a vengeance, felt sore and overwhelmed. Dominic didn't try to fix it. He just was. He brought her ice packs and warm compresses. He walked a wailing Lyra up and down the long hallway, humming a Bach piece in a low, soothing rumble. When Evelyn finally slept for 2 consecutive hours, she woke to find him in the glider, Lyra asleep on his bare chest, his head tipped back, softly snoring. The sight was a balm to her soul. This was partnership. Not a division of labor, but a shared immersion in the beautiful, messy reality they'd created. A week in, the outside world began to gently intrude. Flowers arrived from the office, a stunning arrangement from the Black Softwares team. Dominic's assistant, Sharon, a woman of legendary efficiency, began forwarding only the most critical emails, handling the rest with a note. Asterisk on parental leave. Do not disturb. Asterisk one afternoon, as Evelyn nursed Lyra in the glider, Dominic sat at the piano, playing the haunting piece she'd helped him with months before. It flowed perfectly now, the melancholy melody filled with a new tender warmth. He played it softly, a private concert for his girls. We should have her christened, he said as the last note faded. Evelyn looked up from Lyra's drowsy face. Christened? I didn't take you for the religious type. I'm not. It's not about religion. It's about ceremony. About declaring to the world and to her that she is welcomed, cherished, and part of a community. Our community. He swiveled on the bench to face her. It can be whatever you want. A backyard gathering. A non-denominational blessing. Just a celebration of her. And of us. And of us. He was thinking about family, about legacy, about weaving their new small unit into the wider tapestry of their lives. It was a forward-looking gesture. One that assumed a future of birthdays and holidays and gathered loved ones. Okay, Evelyn said, smiling. Let's plan a celebration. He grinned, the boyish, unguarded expression that still made her heart flip. I'll have Sharon start a list. But first, there was another, more private ceremony to attend to. The following weekend, with Lyra asleep in her bassinet under Bethany's watchful eye. Go. She's a blob that eats and sleeps, I can handle a blob. Dominic took Evelyn for a drive. He didn't tell her where they were going. They left the city, the buildings giving way to rolling green hills. After about 40 minutes, he turned onto a long gravel driveway lined with young oak trees. At the end stood the house. Her breath caught. It was no longer just lines on paper. The foundation was poured, the frame erected. The skeleton of their future stood against the sky. Raw wood beams outlining the rooms they designed together. The wall of glass for the living room was already installed. Reflecting the cloudy afternoon sky, he helped her out of the car. The ground was churned with mud and tire tracks, the air smelling of fresh-cut wood and damp earth. He led her carefully over the planks laid as a temporary path. It's just a shell, he said, his voice hushed in the vast empty space. But I wanted you to see it, to stand in it. They walked through the open spaces that would become their kitchen, their living room. He pointed to where the fireplace would be, to the alcove for the piano. Sunlight streamed through the future windows, painting golden rectangles on the subfloor. In the wing meant for the nursery and playroom. He stopped. This is her room, he said. Her view will be those woods. She'll see deer in the mornings. Evelyn could imagine it. The finished walls, the soft rug, a tiny Lyra pressing her hands to the glass. She walked to the center of the empty room, her footsteps echoing. This was where their daughter would take her first steps, have her first tantrum, build blanket forts. Dominic came up behind her, his arms circling her waist, his hands splaying over her stomach, now soft and empty but forever marked by the life it had carried. He rested his chin on her shoulder. This is the foundation, he murmured into her hair. Everything we build from now on, our marriage, our family, our lives, it starts here. On ground we chose together. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes, blurring the raw beams and the green beyond. He wasn't just showing her a construction site. He was showing her their bedrock, the tangible proof of his commitment, not just to her, but to the life they were actively creating day by day, decision by decision. She turned in his arms, linking her hands behind his neck. Sawdust was caught in the dark stubble along his jaw. He looked more like himself here, amidst the chaos of creation, than he ever did in a boardroom. "I love you," she said, the word still new enough to feel like a revelation on her tongue. "So much it terrifies me." He smiled, that slow, transformative smile reserved only for her. "Good," he said, dipping his head to kiss her, his lips warm and sure against hers. "Because I plan on giving you a lifetime of reasons to be terrified. And a lifetime of me being right here, holding your hand through all of it." They stood for a long time in the skeleton of their future home, wrapped in each other, the wind whistling through the open frame, carrying the scent of promise. Later, back at the penthouse, with Lyra fed and sleeping in his arms, Dominic looked across the room at Evelyn, who was dozing on the couch. The journey from a photograph on a fridge to this moment felt both impossibly long and like the blink of an eye. He had loved her as a brilliant stranger, ached for her as another man's wife, protected her as a vulnerable survivor, and now cherished her as the mother of his child, the architect of his peace, the love of his life. The wait was over. The quiet, desperate yearning had been replaced by a deep, resonant contentment. He had his family. He had his foundation. And he had forever to build upon it. Chapter 12. The weeks after visiting the construction site took on a new quality. It was as if standing in the skeleton of their future had made the present more vivid, more precious. Lyra began to unfurl from a sleepy newborn into a baby with preferences. She hated having her feet tucked into sleepers, loved the sound of running water, and would stare mesmerized at the abstract painting over Dominic's piano. Evelyn's body healed. Her energy, siphoned for so long by pregnancy and birth, began to return in tentative bursts. She started taking short walks with Lyra in a carrier, the solid weight of her daughter against her chest a grounding joy. Dominic, who had taken a full month of parental leave, worked from the penthouse, his office door always open, emerging for diaper changes and to press kisses to the tops of their heads. The celebration of Lyra, they'd settled on calling it a welcome ceremony, was planned for a sunny Saturday in early autumn. Dominic, true to his word, had handled the logistics with Sharon's help, but he consulted Evelyn on every detail. The guest list was small and intentional. Bethany, of course, Evelyn's small loyal team from work, Dominic's inner circle from the company, people like his unflappable CFO Marcus and his sharp-headed legal counsel Lena, and a few close friends. Notably absent was any member of the Blackwood family. That chapter was sealed shut. The ceremony was held in the private rooftop garden of a museum Dominic patronized. It was a space of curated wildness, lavender and ornamental grasses, stone pathways, a reflecting pool. A local poet friend of Bethany's performed a non-denominational blessing, speaking of welcome, of light, of legacy chosen rather than inherited. Lyra, dressed in a simple linen gown, slept peacefully in Dominic's arms throughout. Afterwards, as guests mingled over glasses of sparkling cider and exquisite canapés, Evelyn watched Dominic move through the crowd. He wasn't holding court. He was connecting. He introduced Evelyn's junior engineers to his venture capitalist friends. He listened intently as Bethany explained her latest artistic project. He made sure Marcus met Evelyn's sharpest programmer, planting the seed for a future mentorship. He was weaving their worlds together, not by force, but with deliberate, graceful threads. He was building their community. Bethany sidled up to Evelyn, nodding toward Dominic, who was now showing a fascinated Lena the intricate stitching on Lyra's gown. "He's the real deal, Evie. I did a full background check, you know, professionally and personally." Evelyn laughed. "Of course you did. And he's boringly clean. No skeletons. Just a lot of quiet philanthropy and a 7-year history of staring longingly at a certain systems engineer's employee file." Bethany squeezed her arm. "He looks at you like you built the stars. And at her," she nodded to Lyra, "like she is one. You did good. You both did." The warmth of the day, the love in the air, the feeling of being securely anchored in this new life. It was almost too much happiness to hold. At a few days after the ceremony, Evelyn felt a familiar itch. It was the itch to engage her mind with something beyond lactation schedules and sleep cycles. She wandered into Dominic's home office, where he was on a video call. He muted himself instantly. "Everything okay?" "Yes. I think I'm ready to look at some work. Not full-time. Maybe just a few hours a week remotely. To keep my brain from turning to pureed peas. A look of profound understanding and relief crossed his face. He hadn't wanted to push, but he'd seen her restlessness. Of course. I'll have Sharon send you the priority list. You can pick a project. No deadlines. Just intellectual stimulus. The simple, unquestioning support was a gift. That afternoon, she settled Lyra in a bassinet next to the drafting table and opened her laptop. The familiar glow of the screen, the logic puzzles of code, felt like slipping into a favorite powerful skin. She was Evelyn Breyer, brilliant systems engineer, and Evelyn, mother of Lyra. The two parts could coexist. He was ensuring they did. One evening, Lyra was battling a bout of unexplained fussiness. Evelyn had tried everything. Feeding, rocking, walking, singing. But the wails continued, sharp and heartbreaking. Frustration and exhaustion began to curdle into despair. Dominic, who had been finishing up emails, came into the nursery. He didn't offer advice. He simply took the red-faced, screaming bundle from her arms. Go take a bath. A long hot one. Lock the door. But she's fed, she's clean, she's safe. She's just having a hard time. We can handle it. Go. The permission was a lifeline. Evelyn sank into the steaming tub, the sounds of Lyra's cries muffled by the door and the water. She let the heat soak into her bones. 20 minutes later, she emerged, wrapped in a robe, her muscles loose. The apartment was quiet. She padded to the living room. Dominic was sprawled in the glider, shirtless, Lyra splayed asleep on his bare chest. One of his large hands covered her entire back. He was reading a hardbound book on quantum computing, his reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked up as she entered, a soft smile on his face. She wore herself out, he whispered. We had a philosophical debate about the merits of sleeping. I won. Evelyn's heart turned over. This was the reality of their love. Not just the grand gestures or the passionate kisses, but this, the quiet resilience, the shared burdens, the sight of her fierce, intellectual lover using his formidable mind to soothe their colicky infant. She curled up on the sofa opposite him, just watching them. The love she felt was a deep, steady river, not a crashing wave. It was built on moments like these. A few days later, a large flat package was delivered. Dominic wasn't home. He'd taken Lyra for a walk in the park to give Evelyn some true alone time. The package was addressed to her. Inside, carefully wrapped, was a framed piece of art. But it wasn't a painting or a print. It was a beautiful, intricate schematic. At first glance, it looked like an elegant, abstract circuit board or a blueprint for a celestial instrument. But as she looked closer, her breath caught. The lines and nodes were formed from thousands of tiny words, lines of code and data points. She recognized her own handwriting, notes from her senior thesis presentation. She saw fragments of the prototype code she built for Black Softwares. And woven throughout in his bold, slashing script were dates, coordinates, and simple phrases. Asterisk first sight. Auditorium. 3:14 p.m. Asterisk asterisk her laugh at the company picnic. Felt like sunlight. Asterisk asterisk the day she left him. Hope terrible and bright. Asterisk asterisk the night of the gala. Mine. Finally. Asterisk asterisk first heartbeat. 167 BPM. Our universe began. Asterisk asterisk Lyra. 7:02 a.m. Perfection. Asterisk it was a map. A map of his love for her, plotted in data and moments across 7 years. It was the most personal, profound thing anyone had ever created for her. It was a visualization of the silent history he'd carried. Now gifted to her, she was still standing there, tears silently tracking down her face when he returned. The stroller was parked by the door, Lyra cooing inside it. He took in the open package, the framed schematic in her hands, her tear-streaked face. He walked to her, stopping a foot away. I wanted you to have a tangible record, he said, his voice low. Of the journey, of how long you've been loved, so you never doubt it again. She set the frame down carefully and launched herself into his arms. He caught her, holding her tight, his face buried in her hair. I don't doubt it, she whispered against his neck. I wish I'd known. He pulled back, cradling her face. It wasn't your time to know. It was your time to live, to learn, to become the woman who could walk out of a fire and straight into my arms. He kissed her slow and deep. You're here now. That's all that matters. From her stroller, Lyra let out a happy gurgle, as if in agreement. Later, after Lyra was asleep and the city lights glittered beyond the windows, they sat on the floor, the frame schematic between them. She traced the lines that represented her own history, seeing it through the lens of his devotion. When? She asked, pointing to a cluster of nodes near the center labeled with the dates of her divorce proceedings. That was the darkest part, he admitted. Knowing you were in pain fighting for your freedom, and I had to stay away. I wanted to burn his world down. But I knew you needed to win that battle yourself. So I watched. And I prepared. Prepared for what? For this. He gestured to the room, to the nursery down the hall, to her. For the moment you were free. I had the house plans drafted 2 days after your divorce was finalized. I had the penthouse child-proofed a week later. I was a coiled spring, Evelyn, waiting for a sign that you could bear the weight of my love. The sheer, patient strategy of it took her breath away. His love hadn't been a passive, wistful thing. It had been an active, disciplined force, gathering its strength, waiting for the right moment to build her a new world. She leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. I love you, Dominic Blackwood. With every line of code in my body, with every beat of my heart. He held her close, his lips against her hair. And I will love you, Evelyn Breyer, until the last star in that schematic goes dark. It was a vow she could build a forever on. Chapter 13. The frame schematic took up residence on the wall of Dominic's study. A modern family heirloom. Life settled into a rhythm that felt less like a tentative new dance and more like a steady shared heartbeat. Evelyn's part-time remote work became a lifeline to her professional self, a reminder that she was more than milk and lullabies. Dominic returned to the office 3 days a week, but his presence was woven into the fabric of their days. A 10 a.m. video call just to see their faces, a lunchtime text with a funny industry article, his key in the door precisely at 6. Lyra grew, revealing a personality that was a perfect, wondrous blend of them both. She had Dominic's intense, focused gaze but Evelyn's stubborn, problem-solving frown. She was solemn one moment, then would break into a gummy, radiant smile that was all her own, capable of disarming them completely. The house in the hills grew too. Photos from the site superintendent arrived weekly. Walls went up, the roof was sealed, windows installed. It was no longer a skeleton but a body, waiting for its soul. One crisp October afternoon, Evelyn was on the floor of the penthouse living room with Lyra, who was in the midst of a determined, wobbly attempt to roll from her back to her stomach. Dominic was due home any minute. Her phone buzzed. A notification from the building's security app. Not an alert, but a saved log. She rarely checked these. Dominic monitored them. Curiosity prompted her to open it. It was a log of keycard accesses to the private garage elevator, the one that served only the penthouse. She scrolled, expecting to see the regular rhythm of Dominic's entries and exits. And she did. But mixed in, for months now, long before Lyra was born, before the hospital, before the kiss in the atrium, were late-night entries. 1:23 a.m. 2:47 a.m. Always between midnight and 4. Her blood ran cold, then hot with confusion. It wasn't another woman. The idea was laughable. His devotion was absolute, a palpable force. But this was a secret, a pattern. Before she could spiral, the front door opened. Dominic came in, shrugging off his coat, his face lighting up at the sight of them on the floor. My girls. He crossed the room, dropping a kiss on Evelyn's head, then lying on his stomach to coo at Lyra, who rewarded him with a triumphant squeal as she finally achieved her role. Evelyn watched him, the secret log a cold stone in her stomach. She waited until after dinner, after Lyra was down for the night. They were in the study, him at his desk, her on the sofa with a tablet. I saw the elevator logs, she said, her voice calm. She'd learned from him, direct, unaccusing, seeking data. He looked up from his screen, his expression shifting from relaxed focus to immediate understanding. He didn't look guilty. He looked exposed. He closed his laptop. I was wondering when you'd see those. What were you doing, Dominic? For months, in the middle of the night. He stood and walked to the window, his back to her for a moment. Then he turned, his face a mask of raw vulnerability. I was checking on you. The answer was so simple, so devastating it left her speechless. After the divorce, he continued, his voice low. After what happened at the grocery store, I knew you were in that studio alone. I knew you were hurting. I couldn't sleep. So, I would come down. I would stand outside your door. Just for a minute. Just to listen. Her mind reeled. She thought of all those nights, wrapped in loneliness and grief. A thin layer of wood and drywall separating her from this man who loved her so fiercely he was literally standing guard. You've listened for sounds of distress, crying, anything that meant you needed help. I had a key to your apartment from the building manager for emergencies, he thought. I never used it. I just needed to be close, to know you were safe. It was the only thing that let me sleep for a few hours afterwards. The image was heartbreaking. The mighty Dominic Black reduced to a silent sentinel in a dim hallway, his ear pressed to her door, his heart in his throat. It wasn't surveillance. It was a vigil. Why didn't you just come in? She whispered. Why didn't you knock? He crossed the room, kneeling in front of her, taking her hands. Because you needed to be the one to open the door, Evelyn. To your life, to your future. To me. I could protect you from outside threats. I could not protect you from your own heart. That was a journey you had to make alone. My job was to be there when you finished it. The tears came then, slow and quiet. He had loved her with a terrifying, patient depth that respected her autonomy even as it ached to intervene. He had been her unseen shield, her silent witness. I never heard you, she said. Good. That was the point. He brushed her tears away with his thumbs. I didn't want you to feel watched. I wanted you to feel safe, even if you didn't know the source. She cupped his face, looking into the eyes of the man who had loved her in the most inconvenient, overwhelming, selfless way possible. You are the most extraordinary person I have ever known. He leaned into her touch, closing his eyes. I am a man who loved a woman. Everything else is just logistics. The revelation deepened their bond in a profound way. Evelyn saw the lengths of his devotion, and it erased the last faint shadow of doubt. His love wasn't just declarations and blueprints. It was midnight vigils and silent sacrifices. A week later, the site superintendent called. The house was weathertight, the interior complete enough for a walkthrough. They bundled Lyra up and made the drive. This time it wasn't a skeleton. It was a home. The raw wood was covered in drywall, painted the soft, warm gray Evelyn had chosen. The floors were wide plank oak, gleaming under the temporary work lights. The grand window in the living room framed the autumn forest like a living painting. They moved through the echoing rooms. The kitchen, with its empty spaces for appliances, waiting to be filled with the sounds of family meals. The music room, its perfect acoustics already apparent. The nursery, sun-drenched and quiet, in the master bedroom. Dominic led her to a wall. This, he said, is a secret. He pressed a panel in the wall, and a section swung open silently, revealing a narrow, hidden corridor. It leads to the nursery, he explained, his voice hushed. A direct path. So if she cries at night, you don't have to go through the cold hallway. Evelyn stepped into the corridor. It was lined with sound-absorbing panels. A soft, motion-activated glow lit their way. At the other end was another concealed door. Opening into the back of the nursery's closet. It was a secret passage. Not for intrigue but for comfort. A physical manifestation of his desire to shorten the distance between them and their child, to make her path easier. She turned to him in the dim, golden glow of the passageway. Lyra, snug in his carrier, slept between them. You think of everything, she breathed. I try. He looked down the corridor, then back at her. This house, it's not just a structure. It's a machine for happiness. Every wall, every wire, every hidden door is designed with one purpose. To give you and Lyra the most beautiful, secure, joyful life I can possibly engineer. This is my life's work, Evelyn. You are my life's work. In that hidden space with their daughter breathing softly between them, Evelyn understood completely. She wasn't a chapter in his story. She was the entire library. He had spent years building an empire, not for power or prestige, but to create a foundation strong enough to hold the family he'd always dreamed of. She reached for him, pulling him into a kiss that was a vow, a thanksgiving, a homecoming. The future was no longer a distant blueprint. It was the solid floor beneath their feet, the walls around them, the secret corridor connecting their hearts. It was here. It was now. It was theirs. The inn,